apparently there's been a wild upswing in the amount of murder in London. Well, that's not a tremendous shock, considering that the demographics of London have changed, that the policing in London has changed wildly, that the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is really terrible at his job. But the murder rate in London now outstrips the murder rate in New York, which is pretty incredible, actually. Right? The murder rate in Britain has always been extraordinarily low. This is why when people say, well, you ban guns in Britain, that's why the murder rate is low. The murder rate was low before the bans on guns. And the murder rate in Britain was always quite low. Okay, but here is what it says according to Today Online. On Thursday, April 5th, 5 teenagers were stabbed in an hour and a half before sunset, including a boy of 13. All these attacks took place in London over the past week, part of an apparent spike in violence in the British capital. After a long period of steady declines in violent crime, the city has averaged in excess of 3 killings a week so far this year. More than 50 people have been killed in London since the start of 2018. The total for all of 2017, a year when the city suffered multiple deadly terrorist attacks, was 116. Criminologists have expressed caution about drawing conclusions from only a few months' figures, but if the uptick continues, it will amount to London's highest level of violence in more than a decade. A year with 200 homicides for a city of 8.5 million people would be far from a shocking high in the U.S. New York City had 292 murders last year, according to the 2018 police commissioner's report. That was a record low. But right now, London's murder rate is outstripping the murder rate in New York City, which is, again, a pretty incredible thing. So I do love what they are now talking about in London. They're now talking about banning knives. No joke. So they're using the exact same logic they used about guns, and now they're applying it to knives. So Sadiq Khan has announced a broad new knife control policy designed to keep, quote-unquote, weapons of war out of the hands of Londoners looking to cause others harm. The UK Parliament is considering bills that would restrict the manufacture and purchase of kitchen cooking knives because they have points on them, because they're pointy things. So I guess machetes would still be okay, like the one that guy used a couple of years ago, that Muslim terrorist used to chop down an actual British soldier on the streets of London. And that'll still be okay. Because as we all know, machetes aren't really dangerous. Like from every horror film, we know machetes aren't dangerous. Only knives are dangerous. But they're going to start determining how exactly knives are distributed. The tough immediate measures involve an incredible police crackdown, a ban on home deliveries of knives and acid, and expanding law enforcement stop and search powers so the police may stop anyone they believe to be a threat or planning a knife or acid attack. Khan announced Friday the city has created a, quote, violent crime task force of 120 officers tasked with rooting out knife-wielding individuals in public spaces, and is pumping nearly $50 million into the Metropolitan Police Department so they can better arm themselves against knife attacks. He's also empowering the Met Police to introduce targeted patrols with extra stop and search powers for areas worst affected, according to a statement. Now, one of the what's really kind of hilarious here is that one of the reasons that the crime rate is going up is because Khan is responsible for, according to Emily Zanotti at the Daily Wire, for decreasing the number of stop and searches, having previously declared the tactic racist and potentially Islamophobic. So in other words, he got rid of stop and frisk in London, saying that it was targeting too many young Muslim guys. And then the crime rate went up, and now he's going to target everyone. It's not really clear what they're going to use in London to cut their food anymore if you can't get a home delivery of a knife. And if you're not allowed to carry it home, how do you actually get the knife from the department store home? Parliament is set to take up heavy knife control legislation when it resumes this week. The UK government is expected to introduce a ban on online knife sales and home knife deliveries. So now you have to go to a store to purchase a knife. Maybe you have to have a license to purchase a knife. You have to be a culinary specialist? They declare it illegal to possess zombie knives and knuckle dusters in private. Zombie knives are those defined as being manufactured for the purpose of being used as a person-to-person weapon, and ban sales of caustic materials to anyone under the age of 18. Of course, that won't really stop anything, since most of these acid attacks that have been occurring are occurring among people who are late teenagers or older. London has seen a dramatic uptick in murder rates, of course. So again, it ain't about the knives, folks. Maybe you ought to look at the people who are wielding the knives. Maybe you ought to be looking at the people who are actually performing the acid attacks. But since we're not allowed to do that, we're going to crack down on knives, and then we'll crack down on fists, and then we'll crack down on any blunt object in your home. You won't be allowed to have blunt objects. Soon, we'll end up all sitting in blank rooms with no furniture, because anything can be used as, maybe pillows, but no, we could use pillows for suffocation. So eventually, we're all just walking around like John Travolta in The Bubble Boy, because that presumably will stop crime, not actually targeting criminals. Pretty amazing stuff, but demonstrates what happens when an entire civilization loses their mind and stops targeting criminality and starts instead pretending that the tools of criminality are more important than the criminals themselves. Battle with the mayor of London, apparently. And this is not a supremely smart thing from President Trump. The reason I say that is not because I think he's wrong about Sadiq Khan. I think Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, is just a turd. I think he's an awful mayor. I think he's made room for radical Islam to rise in his city. I think that he's done a terrible job of promulgating Western values. But that said, in the middle of a terror attack, President Trump decided that it would be a good time to attack Khan, not on the fact that Khan's policies had actually been really negative and bad, but on the fact that Khan had called for calm, which was weird. So it's, that was not, I thought, the world's greatest move by Trump. But the media have jumped on this because, again, there's a general tendency out there on the right to celebrate every time Trump says something that's politically incorrect without regard to whether it's helpful or not. And I think that is still a key question. Is it helpful when Trump says things, or is it not helpful? I'm more interested in helpful versus not helpful than I am in emotionally satisfying versus non-emotionally satisfying. If I want emotional satisfaction, that's why I have a wife, that's why I have a kid, and that's why I have 2 kids, and that is why most people have a dog. If you want emotional satisfaction, find people you love and be emotionally satisfied by them. You're not going to find emotional satisfaction in a president saying things, at least not longer than the next 5 minutes. What you actually need is efficiency, efficacy, a president who's able to promulgate a message. So the left has jumped on the fact that Trump attacked Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, for no real reason. Again, there are plenty of good reasons to attack Sadiq Khan, who is a garbage mayor and a garbage politician and a bad representative of reform, moderate Islam. Lots of reasons to attack him. That's not why Trump attacked him. And so the media have jumped on that to attempt to create this wedge between Britain and the United States, particularly because there's a big British election that's coming up in the next week. So CNN's Jim Acosta asked at the White House press conference yesterday if Trump was attacking Khan because Khan was Muslim.
Is it a travel ban?
Look, I don't think the president cares what you call it, whether you call it a ban, whether you call it a restriction. He cares that we call it national security and that we take steps to protect the people of this country. It's real simple. Everybody wants to get into the labels and the semantics of it, but the bottom line is he's trying to protect the citizens of this country. The danger is extremely clear. The law is very clear, and the need for this executive order is very clear, and the president's priority in protecting the people is very clear. Full stop.
And let me ask you to follow up on what John was asking about with respect to the mayor of London. There are going to be folks who are going to ask the question, was the president attacking the mayor of London because he's Muslim?
Not at all. And I think to suggest something like that is utterly ridiculous.
And she's right. That's not why Trump was attacking him. Trump was attacking him because he saw something on Fox and Friends and got mad, and so he decided to attack him. That's really the reason. But now Sadiq Khan is using the attack from Trump as a reason to drive a wedge. And again, this is just in time for the British election. So the London mayor, according to The Guardian, the London mayor, Sadiq Khan, has called on the British government to cancel a planned state visit by President Trump after being criticized in 2 tweets by the U.S. president. Trump initially criticized Khan for his response to the London Bridge terrorist attack, though in doing so he misquoted London's mayor. Khan's office pointed out Trump's error later, but the president responded by accusing London's mayor of making a pathetic excuse. Khan said Trump was wrong about many things and said his state visit should not go ahead. He said, I don't think we should roll out the red carpet to the president of the USA in the circumstances where his policies go against everything we stand for. Now, the reason that this matters is not because it matters if Trump says bad things about Sadiq Khan. The reason is because this is one case where rhetoric comes into conflict with goals. So if you are President Trump, you would much, much rather have Theresa May, the Tory leader, the conservative leader in Britain, at the top of the government with a major conservative majority than have Jeremy Corbyn, who's an insane person, okay? Jeremy Corbyn is legitimately a crazy human being. And yet Jeremy Corbyn is now running neck and neck with Theresa May. The last thing you want to do is make life tough for Theresa May. It's a big mistake. It's really foolish. But that's exactly what's happening. There's an op-ed today in, I think it's the New York Times, in which there's somebody who is a guy named, who is this? This is Roger Cohen, who I've never heard of before. But Roger Cohen is apparently a columnist for the New York Times, and he's writing about the election. And here is what he writes. And this is, I think, unfortunately, a common sentiment in Europe. It doesn't mean they're right. It means that they're stupid and suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. But Trump should know that and he'd be smart to downplay all of this. Here's what the column says, quote, "For a long time, I could not bring myself to write about the British election. Trump coddling, self-important, flip-flopping Theresa May, ensconced at 10 Downing Street without ever being elected prime minister, was going to sweep to her hard Brexit victory and take the country down her little England rabbit hole. There were more important things to think about, like the end of the American century in 2017, 100 years after the Bolshevik Revolution. A boorish clown named Donald Trump brought down the curtain. In Britain, anyway, there was no story. The June 8th vote was a formality. The Labour Party was in meltdown, having exited the Blairite middle ground for leftist orthodoxy under Jeremy Corbyn. The British, their ludicrous vote to keep the EU gradually sinking in, had morphed into sheep. May would get her mandate to do her worst with Boris Johnson, a foreign secretary who long since forsook any claim to be taken seriously, cheering her on. Then came two unspeakable terrorist attacks, one in Manchester and one in London. Of course, Trump tried to make cheap political capital from the blood on London streets. He quoted London's Mayor Sadiq Khan out of context in a flurry of tweets aimed at buttressing the case for his bigotry. And then he goes on, this crazy columnist, and this is it's an amazing column, because here's what he comes to, okay? Quote, "Elections take place in the real world. They often involve unpleasant choices. I dislike Corbyn's anti-Americanism, his long flirtation with Hamas, his coteries' clueless leftover Marxism and anti-Zionism, his NATO bashing, his unworkable tax and spend promises. He's of that awful Cold War left that actually believed Soviet Moscow was probably not as bad as Washington. Still, Corbyn would not do May's shameful Trump love thing." Can you understand what's happening here? There's a counter-Trump movement that is now rising in Europe. It's why Emmanuel Macron was trying to out-handshake Trump when he went to Brussels. It is why the prime ministers of the Nordic countries took a picture mocking Trump by putting their hand on a soccer ball. It is why Jeremy Corbyn, in part, is rising in the polls as a reaction to the relationship between Theresa May and Trump. Trump is wildly less popular in Europe than he is here, and Trump should know that. Instead, by polarizing with his tweets, I don't know what benefit there is to this. It is funny. There's I'm trying to remember who it was who tweeted out this morning that Trump's Twitter is just the greatest thing ever. Trump himself tweeted it out. So Trump himself tweeted out this morning that the fake news MSM wants him to stop tweeting because he's speaking directly to the people. Okay, that is just a lie. The media love nothing better than when Trump tweets. It is their favorite thing in the world when Trump tweets because it gives them something to cover. I mean, Jake Tapper is right. He tweets, "Fact check, MSM eats up his tweets like Skittles. It's White House advisors, lawyers, and Trump supporters who want him to stop tweeting." Again, the reason that I point this out is because there's a tweet from Chris Barron, who's a big supporter of President Trump's, and he tweets, "Trump's use of social media is pure genius. The media chases every squirrel he releases. Maybe the media should get off Twitter." And so I tweeted back, "Please name the policy priorities advanced thanks to Trump's Twitter use as president." Okay, as distinguished from Trump's Twitter use during the campaign. During the campaign, campaigning is not being president. Obama, very good at campaigning, terrible president. Trump, good at campaigning. Apparently not that great at effectuating policy. And the reason this matters is because this actually has ramifications for foreign policy. We've already gotten a leftist elected in South Korea who's adversarial to American interests in South Korea, largely out of backlash to Trump. Now we are about to get Jeremy Corbyn, who's a nutcase Marxist, anti-Semitic piece of crap, elected to the prime ministership of Great Britain because Trump feels the need to pick fights with random politicians in London. How is this effective? How is this good? So before we all celebrate, ooh, he's a bull in a china shop and he's breaking things and yay! Okay, why don't we think about maybe the things that he's breaking? We might need those things, like Theresa May. We might need that thing. The conservative prime minister the conservative president, prime minister in South Korea. We might have needed that guy. Not everything is worth breaking. Perceptions are worth breaking. That's great. But if it comes along with also destroying the policies that would allow us to actually finish those perceptions once and for all, then it's a mistake.